Most recently, she's began blogging about the COVID and other topics. And you can find her work by Googling Counseling from a Christian View. So with that in mind, we'll just turn it over to Cynthia. And thank you so much, Cynthia, for your willingness to be available today.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you for all who have joined us. It's been a tough year. And as I've observed what's happening around us, there have been themes that have emerged that are common to us all. And that was why I began to blog and thought that this would be helpful for people who are struggling in the midst of COVID. Interesting, the timing of this seminar, March 12th was 2020, was the beginning of lockdowns in the United States. And so that date came, and I don't think anybody thought we would be here at this point a year later. I think we were all hoping, praying that it would be over, but it certainly is not. And so the stress continues, the struggle continues. And because of that, this timing for how to cope with all of it is very timely. As Karen mentioned, we are recording, and so be conscious of that. Also, I'm going to take a break about every 10 minutes with different sections. If you have questions or comments, you can ask them at that time. We might be covering your question later. And then at the end, we will have questions for everyone. All right, let's get started then. Coping with COVID. And you see on our first slide, my featured picture is toilet paper, because that was the issue of concern on March 12th, people bulking up on toilet paper, storing it anywhere and everywhere. So when we think about coping with COVID, one of the first things we think about is the loss that we have all incurred. And there are lots of different losses. First is the loss of security. Up until this point, we were pretty secure with our lives and how we managed our lives. But now things are so complicated. I remember when we first had the lockdown, I wanted to make a recipe. I needed lemons, didn't have lemons. So now the question is, do I risk going out to get the lemons, or do I become creative and make something totally different that doesn't need lemons? Simple things drive home the losses in our life. Now we have to wear masks. Some places require gloves, and all this weighs on us. Then there's the loss of freedoms that we have had. Before, I could go where I wanted to go, when I wanted to go. Now, then and now, I may not be able to drive to another state because of shutdowns between states, or quarantining if I leave a state or go to a state. And so I can't really have the freedom to go like I used to. There was a little sign that I saw that said, wash your hands and say your prayers because Jesus and germs are everywhere. So we do not have that freedom that we used to have. We're very, very aware of what is out there. One loss is community, and we are all very aware of the loss of community, especially within our churches, our worship. The word for 2020 and now 21 will be social distancing. The community that we have lost, staying 6 feet away from one another, no play dates for the kids. Even the playgrounds have been shut down. No hugs, no spring break, although I see on the news that kids are still going to spring break. Funerals have been impacted. We ourselves have had 2 deaths in our family and have not been able to go to funerals because of that. Even births have been impacted. A year ago, only mom could be present. dad would be zoomed in for the birth of their child. So very sad. And then there's the loss of celebrations. There are rites of passage that come to us in life, and we've had to give those things up because of the pandemic. There are proms for those young adults who have graduated from high school. A year ago, they did not have their senior prom, their senior parties, the senior yearbook signing. It all came to a screeching halt. It was very, very hard to deal with that. And things like parties, bridal showers, weddings, the celebrations that bring us such joy and being together are no longer able to happen. It's very sad to lose those things. And then there's the loss of events. The first thing I think of is the Philadelphia Phillies are starting up again, I think. I'm not a real baseball fan, but I see what's happening. And they were putting, or maybe it was the NFL, they were putting cardboard cutouts of people in the stands so that the players felt like there was an audience, a crowd, and of course the crowd noise. Even the players said it helped only a little bit. It wasn't the real deal, and they knew it. So we lose the events that mean so much to us. Let's just take a few minutes if anybody has questions on that or comments. We will be going on, and so there's other sections to come. If you don't have any comments, we'll keep going on. Anyone? All right, let's keep going then. Maybe you see yourself in one of these pictures. Tears, feeling like you've been imprisoned in your own home, your own four walls. One of the ways that we have coped with COVID is to understand that we're having a grief of very much of a loss. And so the process of grief speaks to us as we understand the emotions, the very strong feelings we've gone through in this past year. One of the first things that we've experienced is shock and denial. Certainly, they must be kidding when they say we can't just go to the store to pick up lemons, or it must be incorrect that I just can't walk outside. Other countries have had much more strict regulations, and our daughter in Spain could only go out for, say, an hour on Tuesday and Thursday from 1 to 2, or other times. But we here in the States have had much more freedom than that. Depending on where you live, the shock and denial of what's really happening is very, very strong. And then there comes the anger. Don't tell me what I can and cannot do. Certain individuals feel that a little bit more than others. We want to be able to do what we want to do, when we want to do it, and don't tell me that I can't. And don't tell me how long I have to wash my hands or what song I have to sing, whether it's Happy Birthday or the National Anthem or Amazing Grace or Happy Birthday. There were many songs that were suggested to sing so that we could wash our hands for 20 full seconds. It is irritating to me, and I don't understand why I have to follow the guidelines, why I have to do that when I'm being careful all by myself at home. I get annoyed. There was a year ago a baking pandemic. I blogged about that. Everyone seemed to be baking, and so you couldn't find yeast because people were buying it out at the store, and so it was a reaction to the irritation. I'm going to buy yeast and I'm going to bake bread and buy toilet paper. Next comes bargaining. If I have to stay at home, and if I have to make everything that I have last for 2 weeks, because that's how long we're going to be locked down at home, then I'm going to stretch it out, but just for 2 weeks. And 2 weeks is enough. I will only make it last for 2 weeks, because after that point, everything should be open, right? So I bargain. And then a year ago, and now we're coming up on Easter. What does Easter look like? Can we even have Easter? Can we have other holidays? Certainly, if I have a party, but I distance myself from people, do we wear masks and slip the mask up when we want to have a bite of Easter ham? Do we have Easter egg hunts? There's so much bargaining that we go on. So we tend to barter our way into a celebration that we want to have. Following this comes depression. It's almost expected. And I want my independence back. I'm tired of the whole thing. Cabin fever in the winter is bad, but this is even worse. I may even find ways to pass the time while I'm depressed. I might watch every single thing on Netflix. I might eat more, sleep more, and feel guilty about all of that. The internet has had so many jokes about all of this. A few are, pretty soon I'm going to need a magician, not a beautician. And breaking news, wearing a mask inside your home is highly recommended, not so much to prevent COVID, but to prevent eating. I think we can all relate. A year ago, those things were posted on Facebook, and they were funny then. They're not so funny now, a year later. And so we come to acceptance, or do we? We've reached some form of an acceptance in that this has lasted a year. And so we continue, we wear masks, we wash our hands, we wash or wipe down our groceries. We have ways of getting through this, and we accept it to the degree that we can. Online, there are innumerable sites to help parents and their children, aside from teaching, but to be creative. One thing that popped up a year ago was the movement to chalk your walk, where kids would go outside and draw anything on their driveway to encourage their neighbors. We will get through this. We can do this together. And so it was a way of bonding together, but also to move people to encouragement and to hope. Instead of being stuck at home, maybe we are safe at home. Are there any questions about grief and what that looks like? The next slide actually shows the stages of grief. It's a little blurry, but I wanted to get the whole thing in to show us what we've just been talking about, the loss, the hurt, shock, numbness, denial, all that goes into the grief cycle. And as we continue to go down into this bell curve, it is like feeling like you're going into a tunnel or a dark hole sometimes. People that I've talked to have said this is unbelievably hard. The loss of community, the isolation, very, very hard on people. I have several friends that are therapists, and they are booked virtually 8 hours a day. Plus, they have a waiting list of clients waiting to get in, because people are having a very difficult time with all of the dynamics of COVID. So as you go down the grief cycle, you see we go to anger, fear, disorganization. Is your home disorganized? You put something down and then you can't find it. Well, that may happen normally, but with COVID, the disorganization is even more. And at the bottom, there's loneliness and guilt, the isolation, and then the depression. Re-entry troubles. I've talked with people about what it looks like to enter back in. The question is, maybe we will be able to meet, but how? And will I wear a mask? Will I sit 3 feet or 6 feet? I just saw that the guidelines for schools, they've increased or decreased the distance now for desks, so kids can sit closer together. Do I trust that? Will I do that? New relationships. As we move through the grief cycle, we come to a new adjustment and an acceptance. The thing about the grief cycle is that it is not linear. It is very much, it feels like a tunnel, a deep, deep hole. But it's also like taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back. So just about the time you think, I can get through this pandemic, I'm just fine, I'll wash my hands. That's the very least I can do, and wear a mask. Something else hits you, like not being able to go to a funeral, not having a celebration for seniors who won't have a prom, won't have a graduation. So you go up one side and down the other. You might take 2 or 3 steps back as you face the reality that this is very, very real. So if you have been in this grief cycle, understand that it is not linear. You are definitely, absolutely normal if you feel great one day and awful the next, because it's all part of the loss and the grieving. Grief manifests itself in many different ways. And so I want to look at more of what happens when we are grieving and when we have loss, again, because most of us have experienced some level of this. It's a matter of what we've done with it. And this is perfectly normal. First, the loss of sleep and overeating. I don't know how many pounds have been added from COVID, but many people have said, I just keep eating. I'm bored, so I keep eating, or watching TV, watching Netflix or whatever station through the night. And sleep changes happen as well. I wake up in the middle of the night 2, 3 times. My mind will not turn off. For those of you who've had problems sleeping anyway, this could be adding to it. Weeping. At the drop of a hat, I realize I can't go somewhere, I can't do something, I can't hug my friends. And so weeping, crying, seeing a commercial, seeing someone from afar and crying because I cannot approach them, I cannot see them. Weeping happens, crying just happens almost without a reason. But now that we know the grief cycle and the underpinnings of it, we can see what's contributing to our emotional state. Fatigue, the tiredness that comes from day in and day out of the same routine, whether we're staying at home or whether we're working. The fatigue that has come from this is very, very real. And they call it pandemic fatigue or COVID fatigue. Acute mood swings, anger and frustration. This very much relates again to the grief cycle. We go from anger and frustration. Things are okay, but then things are not okay. And 2 steps forward, 2 steps back, because I don't want to wash my hands. I remember going into a store a year ago and I forgot my mask. It was just starting. And so I had a scarf and I wrapped it around my face and around the back to be the closest approximation to a mask. I did not want to run home to get my mask to go into the store. I was very frustrated. At that point, that was the best that I could do, which relates to the decreased ability to concentrate and remember your mask or other things, concentrating on your task at hand. We get waylaid by one thing. Irritability and complaining. It all comes as part of grief and loss. And physical complaints come in as well. Headaches, backaches, diarrhea, the lack of sleeping, that all comes into play. And the bottom of the grief cycle is the depression and isolation. So that is a more detailed version of the grief cycle. Are there any comments or questions about that? All right, we will go on then. You may see yourself in some of these pictures. Children have been especially impacted by COVID, and they have expressed anxiety in so many ways. Children are very much like sponges. They soak up everything around them and they reflect what's happening. Little eyes are watching us. What do they see? What do they hear? How do they react? When we are irritated and we are complaining, when we're in the midst of grief ourselves, they sense that, they see that, they soak it up. And so we have to be aware that the children are being impacted by this. Children have the lack of routine and lack of school. They're thrust into the middle of our adult worlds. If we're working from home, they're there watching us, and perhaps they have school at home. And so we have so much upheaval in our lives as a result. For them, it's especially difficult. And so we may find that they become irritable. They flare at us for the minor things. Children are not easily able to verbalize their feelings. They don't know how to speak of fear and anxiety. One conversation I had with a grandmother, she asked her tearful granddaughter what was wrong. And the granddaughter said, I don't know. I just don't feel right. And isn't that true for all of us? We just don't feel right. We can't put words to it. But for children, it's even harder. And then there's regression because of the stress that they are under. You may see children who have been cured of sucking their thumb, and suddenly they're back to sucking their thumb, or baby talk. What about blankies? Children love to have a stuffed toy or a blankie, and they may be searching that out, wanting to have comfort from that toy. Adjustment is hard for kids, and so we see anger, and we're going to be dealing with that next. Sleeping and eating patterns may be off. They may not be sleeping well. They may be wanting to crawl into your bed at night to be reassured. And so one of the most important things we can do is to connect with our kids, connect with them, help them to feel safe in the midst of everything that they're going through. One of the things we need to do is to validate our children as they are going through this. To validate means to understand them. It's a recognition, an affirmation that a person's feelings are worthwhile. I've always loved Fred Rogers, and I love this quote from him. People have said, don't cry, to other people for years and years, and all it has meant is, I'm too uncomfortable when you show your feelings. I would rather have them say, go ahead and cry. I'm here to be with you. And there was that phrase from years ago that I hope has been buried forever. Big boys don't cry. Perhaps if we don't tell our children to not cry, but instead to assure them of our love and support, then we can help them to manage the big feelings that they're having in the midst of this. I'm going to attempt to link to this little girl. I think her name is Blair, from Arizona, and this went viral. And it will help us to understand part of what children are experiencing. So let's see if we can connect with that. Oh, good. Okay.
Now everything in this world has to shut all the way down. So nobody has to go anywhere because they're shut down. The ice cream truck is shut down. And the water truck place is shut down, which is my favorite part because it has my favorite one.
What's that?
Yeah, it has the gumball one where there's gunballs and there's like blues. And now they have to shut all the way down and we can't go anywhere. Not even McDonald's, which is my favorite restaurant.
You can pick up McDonald's in the drive-thru.
No, you can't.
Yeah.
You can't.
You can. You can go in the drive-thru, but you can't go on the playground.
Yeah, it's just really frustrating. If you go through the drive-thru, it's just boring because you have to wait for your food to come. And if you're inside playing on the playground, it wouldn't be boring. And now they have to shut down. It's just boring when you wait for food to come.
Yeah.
And now everything in this town has to shut all the way down. And I just don't want it to do that. I mean, why would germs come around to people if they don't want germs to come around to them? Because everyone doesn't like germs since they get sick and everything has to be shut down for everybody to be safe. And it's just not fair because everything that is fun also has to be shut down. And the only thing that is open is nothing. Nothing. Except homes, cars.
Nothing. Yeah, and actually maybe church too. We can't go to church.
Yeah, and it's just really fun.
We're doing home church, that's why we're doing church on the TV, right?
Yeah, but the real church is Heroes Academy, and you get to get candy and toys. And if you have a big number, you can get two.
Wow.
Like Play-Doh, candy. And once I got that fish kind, and it's just, I only wanted to have fun with Play-Doh, so I bought it, and now, like, everything in this world has to be shut down. It's not fair because my games. I'm sorry. There's a lot. It won't last forever.
There, are we back? Hopefully.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, good. This little girl is just darling. And she says, the whole world is shut down. The whole world is just shut down. We can't go anywhere, not even McDonald's, which is my favorite restaurant. She is so dear because she really expresses so much of what we are saying. We can't go anywhere. It feels like the whole world is shut down. Hold on just a second. All right. So what did the parents do well in the midst of this little girl's meltdown? They acknowledged her feelings. It is out of the fullness of the heart that the mouth speaks. And this little girl was shouting what she was feeling and experiencing. The whole world is shut down. Hear them and accept their scary emotions. Give them verbal assurance. Be practical in what we say to them. And 2 Corinthians 1, 3-7 is a guide that as we comfort others with the same comfort with which we have been comforted. Let's get practical then. We can say things like, I'm really sorry that this is happening. Things don't feel right, do they? You're not all by yourself. I'm here with you, and I'm not leaving. I hear you. I hear you with my ears, and I want to hear your heart. It's okay to feel what you feel. Sometimes our big feelings are scary. You don't have to be tough. You are not an island. We are together. Your feelings matter to me. I want to hear more. Help me understand. And so as we talk with our children, we need to ask good questions. One of my favorite bloggers is Rachel Stafford at Hands Free Mama, and she talks about doing a heartbeat check. I do this with my granddaughter when she stays overnight, and it's a wonderful way to connect in with her. What are you excited about? What are you worried about? What was the best part of your day? At night, when we're tucking our children in, there comes that deeper emotional intimacy, and it builds trust and competency. But we do want to avoid the generic, how was your day? Because often, and as they get older, they'll say, or okay. We want to be very specific with them to check their heart. Tim Keller has stated this. It's one of my favorite quotes. To be known and not loved is our greatest fear, but to be fully known and truly loved is, well, a lot like being loved by God. It is what we need more than anything. It liberates us from pretense, humbles us out of our self-righteousness, and fortifies us for any difficulty life can throw at us. And Fred Rogers, again, one of my favorites. At many times throughout their lives, children will feel the world has turned topsy-turvy. It's not the ever-present smile that will help them feel secure. It's knowing that love can hold many feelings, including sadness, and that they can count on the people they love to be with them until the world turns right side up again. Isn't that what we want to do for our children? Help them to process through this when everything feels topsy-turvy. Does anyone have any questions or comments at this point? If not, we're going to move on to the next section.
Cynthia, that video was so helpful. I mean, I think we would all be doing that if we weren't adults. I mean, it so expresses all the wonderful. So thank you for sharing that particularly. It's really helpful to me.
There were so many articles written on that little girl because she really expressed what we were all feeling. The whole world is shut down and I can't get my favorite ice cream, and even McDonald's, my favorite restaurant. It moves you. You just want to care for her and comfort her. So thank you. I really liked that video. I'd be interested to see how she's doing a year later.
I think
oh, go ahead, Daryl.
All too often we assume that if we're not hearing the complaints or the frustration, that we assume that, oh, they're a real trooper. They're hanging in there. It doesn't seem to be affecting them. And to hear that, I think she's probably speaking for a lot of kids who are not able to or given the opportunity to express the frustrations that they're having, and that's, I think, gets exacerbated when you get into the teen years, where you know, the kids are putting a brave face on, and maybe they're only sharing their frustrations with their friends and not the parents. You know, we don't know if we don't provide that opportunity to vent and you know, and if we're not open and accepting of what they're dealing with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What you're talking about is being intentional, which is what, you know, we need to be with our children, what that last section was all about, to be intentional with our kids, because it will be hard for them to get that all out. Yeah. All right, let's go on then. This is our final section, and I've been flying through this to get through all of it, but that's all right. How do we get through quarantine? This is something that we all need. Our kids definitely need us to help them get through quarantine, but we need help too. How do we manage going on over a year now with the changes that have happened, and we don't know if there's an end in sight? First and foremost, keep a routine. This guy's brushing his teeth. Excellent. Get up in the morning, get dressed. There are people that have to be on Zoom meetings, and sometimes there've been jokes about people who only put on their suit coat and tie and are still in their pajama bottoms, and sometimes they get caught. Keeping a routine is crucial to our mental health. Related to that is keeping up your health. Get up and get out. I know for myself, with the winter that we had of snow and ice-covered roads for 6 or 8 weeks, it was very hard to get up and get out. And I could see how it was affecting me. The first 2 videos or pictures are, it looks like a gym. We haven't been back to our gym in over a year now. I definitely miss it, but with the warmer weather, thankfully, starting today, we can at least get up, get out, walk, run, breathe the fresh air, and renew our spirits. It's so important to get out of the 4 walls and to do that. Avoid 24/7 news. I could go back, and some of you might be in this age category, when the TV went off at midnight and there was a symbol in the middle. I forget what it said, but TV did not come back on until the next morning at 6 or 7 a.m. Now there is news and programming 24/7, and you could very much be consumed with another outbreak, another breakdown, what's happening, how to wash your hands again, which mask to wear, whether or not the vaccinations are coming, when, how you should be getting them. We can stress ourselves to the max. And so we don't want to put our heads in the sand and not be aware of what's happening in the news. But at the same time, can we limit it to be knowledgeable, but not overwhelmed? That's the purpose. And then we manage our fear and anxiety. It would be very easy in the midst of all of this to go down that grief and loss cycle into depression and let our minds run with the anxiety that we're feeling. But if we understand that it's important to take hold of that, then we can manage that. Understanding the grief cycle is helpful in the midst of it. Increase community and avoid isolation. Now that's kind of hard. because nursing homes have been locked down. We feel more isolated than ever. But things are starting to open up. When Bob's sister was still living, she was in lockdown in her care home, and we were not able to see her for over a year. It was very hard to not be able to go and encourage her. Instead, we used the telephone. Here in these pictures, we've got people that are probably using Zoom or FaceTime, and they are reaching out to other people. This is so important. We may not have a computer, but we've got our phones. We've got our neighbors. And so as we have gone through this, it has been so important to increase your community. One of the things that we did was we got a dog. We did not get Ella because of the pandemic. We got her before, but we ended up walking her at least 4 times a day. And we found that she's very friendly. And so we met all the other doggy parents and their dogs. I wrote a blog about that. It's been wonderful. We've met so many people that we did not know before, and we didn't feel quite as isolated. It was very, very helpful. So even getting out, waving to a neighbor is helpful. In relation to that, watch your self-talk. The picture of this guy looks very fearful. There are germs everywhere. Are there? We wash our hands, we wipe down groceries, we wipe down a steering wheel. We are as careful as we can be, and we don't go down that rabbit hole of panic and anxiety. One awesome thing about Eeyore is that even though he's basically clinically depressed, he still gets invited to participate in adventures and shenanigans with all of his friends. They never expect him to pretend to feel happy. They just love him anyway, and they never leave him behind or ask him to change. A beautiful picture of what it means to reach out to others, because our neighbors, our friends, our family may very well be depressed, and they need to be included, even with a phone call. Cultivate daily praise. There is always something to be thankful for. And it was interesting when I began looking for pictures on praise and thankfulness. The first thing that popped up was Thanksgiving. Well, I love Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is great. But why do we associate Thanksgiving only, or giving thanks with only Thanksgiving? It should be a daily part of our lives. One of my friends was posting every day something that she was thankful for. And I found myself looking forward to seeing what she was sharing, as well as in myself finding things to be thankful for. There's always something to be thankful for. And filling our mind with God's word. When we rely on scripture, we rely on Christ, we find that we are coming out of ourselves and our feet are set on a solid rock. Serving others is so important. Now, I have a picture of chicken noodle soup, and that is very much on purpose. Our church has had a ministry of reaching out to the neighborhood and taking meals to them, light meals, chicken noodle soup or chili, cornbread. And I've been part of that. I don't sew. We have a sewing project going on right now, but I do bake, and I can drop off cornbread to the church kitchen to be delivered. It feels good to be able to help other people in the midst of this. And again, it gets us out of ourselves and able to serve other people. And in doing so, we're really modeling the love of Christ. Finally, focus on what you can control. We cannot control what is happening in major cities or internationally, but we can control what is happening in our own home. And that includes washing our hands, wearing masks. We can control as much as we can, but we also have to give up the dream that we can control it all. That is a sure way to go down the grief cycle and end up depressed and anxious. Are there any questions or comments? We are at the end of our hour, and that is the end of our presentation. So if you have other questions or comments, I think now would be the time to take them. Oops. I have it here now.
Thank you. This has really been helpful to me. I can remember another time in my life where I have lived inside my own head so much, and that is not my happy place, to be inside my own head. And so thank you. This has been very reassuring and helpful to me, and also very encouraging.
Oh, thank you.
Appreciate your thoughts on this.
Thank you. Any other thoughts or questions?
It's just since we've all lived this for a year now, it's a lot of the observations are obviously very spot on from the grief process. We all know people that were in the hospital and you couldn't visit, and people who died and you couldn't see. And we were talking earlier about how Kathy's mom is out in Altoona, only 4-hour drive away. She hadn't been able to be out there for over a year.
Yeah.
But there's alternatives in the phone and all that, like you talked about, but it's still not quite the replacement. But and with my work with kids on the school bus and all that kind of stuff, you can see how their routine is, oh my goodness, how it really has shaken these kids. Even with the hybrid method where they go in on a Monday, Tuesday and have to be off on a Wednesday and back on Thursday, Friday, that kind, it's still it's broken their routine.
Yes.
They're home, they're not home, they're home, they're in, it's a mess. And from our own personal experiences, we have grandkids that one does work quite well at home and one doesn't do right well at home with the learning process.
Right.
So, I mean, there's so many factors, so many factors.
So many factors. Exactly. Yeah. Has not been easy. I have up a screen here with my website, and you can find me on WordPress. If you want to follow my blog, you can go there and sign up. It will come to your email when I publish, which is, about once a week or so. I try not to inundate people with information. Other than that, that's all the information I have with you, for you. If there's no other questions or comments, then I think we can sign off, Karen.
Thanks, Cynthia.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you. I'm going to share that video with as many people as possible. That was really good.
Thank you. All right. I think we are done then.
All right. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you for joining us, and have a good weekend.
Thank you.